Hey there and welcome back to my NBA 2K17 series. And today we complete the first year of MyGM Mode with the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs are certainly one of those teams that, at least on first sight, don't really need many improvements, but a few things can be tweaked anyway. Let's have a quick look at the situation first, and I think it goes without saying that Cleveland has one of the best cores in the league. They have arguably the best player in the world right now in Lebron James, accompanied by multiple-time All-Stars Kyrie, Irving and Kevin Love. Tristan Thompson at the center is another 80+ overall player with time and room to improve. The only player below an 80 rating is J.R. Smith on the shooting guard, and he is serviceable as well, especially in 2K. If we hop over to the bench, we can see a bit more room for improvement. Let's start at the point guard, where we have Mo Williams as a solid option, but he is 33 years old and on an expiring contract. Kay Felder could theoretically replace him, but I believe he's not yet ready to step into that role on a championship contender. The shooting guard then seems to be the weakest position in the starting lineup, but it is the deepest on the bench, but not necessarily the strongest. Shumpert is your go-to backup here, and then McRae and Liggins will battle for minutes behind him, LeBron and J.R. Smith. That brings us straight to the small forward, where we have three veterans in Jefferson, Dunleavy and Jones. All three are 36 years old and therefore three of the four oldest players on the team. Going simply by their ratings, Jefferson and Dunleavy can still contribute somewhat nicely. A few more restrictions apply to James Jones, but if you know how and when to use his shooting abilities, he's a decent backup at the end of the bench as well. Then we go down low, and here things are a bit more troubling. We have only one backup for the power forward position and only one for the center spot. The power forward is 33-year-old Channing Frye, the center 38-year-old Chris Andersen. All of this seems rather thin, however it has to be said that Kevin Love will log minutes at the center in a more small ball focused lineup with LeBron James at the 4, but still the situation is not ideal. All in all, age is definitely an issue when it comes to the bench in Cleveland, but the cap space also does not allow for much more than veterans who sign for the minimum. With that being said, let's have a more detailed look at who comes off the books after the season is over. You have four guys who will enter free agency straight up. That's your backup point guard Mo Williams, your backup center Chris Andersen, as well as McRae and Jones, who will likely not see too many minutes and therefore won't be missed as much. None of them can be extended before the season ends, so that already outlines a few possibilities for trades. Keep in mind that McRae is a restricted free agent, so if you desperately want him back as a third-string shooting guard, that can be arranged. However, only until someone throws an offer at him that you can't match, because, surprise, cap space is a bit of an issue with the Cavs. You could increase the number of free agents a bit further, because Kay Felder, DeAndre Liggins and Mike Dunleavy have team options coming up, and it is your choice whether or not to keep them on the team. One further thing to keep in mind, because of their age, Chris Andersen, Richard Jefferson, Mike Dunleavy and James Jones could potentially all retire by the end of the season, regardless of whether or not their contracts expire. Draft picks won't be too important because you'll likely pick very late, but for the sake of completion, here's an overview. Cleveland has a first rounder in 2017, then no picks in 2018, a first rounder in 2019 as well as a pick swap on the second rounder in the same year, then in 2020 they have their own first and the Trailblazers second. Nothing too fancy here, and unless you get a really strong draft class, feel free to use your own first rounders as well as any second rounders in trades. In terms of cap space, don't get your hopes up, you won't get out of the negative here unless you make a huge trade. Yes, the contracts of guys like Shumpert or Frye are pretty big compared to their role on the team, but even trading them away wouldn't solve the issue. You could, however, try to get out of the luxury tax, which would require getting rid of $16.5 million in salaries, which seems a lot more doable. All in all, keep in mind that by staying above the cap, your options in free agency will be severely limited. You will only be able to sign either players whose bird rights you possess, aka James Jones, or players who are willing to sign for the veteran minimum. This also leaves you very vulnerable to your offers being easily topped by other teams with more cap space. With the situation in Cleveland lined out, here are your 3 key questions before getting into year number 1. Number 1. What to do with your old and expiring backups, namely Mo Williams and Chris Andersen. Both are not getting any younger and are on expiring deals, while simultaneously not completely unimportant in your team's rotation, although that certainly is more true for Williams than for Andersen. One thing stays the same for both of them though, They will be gone after the season, and that would leave you with 2 holes on your bench that need to be filled. Question number 2, the shooting guard and small forward spots. The Cavs have a whopping 8 players in total who can play those 2 positions. Only one of them can really be utilized elsewhere, and his name is Lebron James. Probably not the type of player that you want to rotate around for the sake of your bench. And the third and final question concerns the luxury tax, yes or no. This is likely a question you'll only ask yourself if you play MyGM, where your team's finances play a much larger role than in MyLeague. The luxury tax can put a huge financial burden on your team, especially if your team is a repeat offender, and it might be a smart idea to get out of it. There are a few contracts that you could get rid of to achieve this, but don't forget that you also have the unique opportunity of winning a championship. With all of this being said and a few roster moves already being outlined, here are 3 moves to make as the Cleveland Cavaliers in year 1 of MyGM or MyLeague mode. Move number 1, we will trade Mo Williams for a longer-term solution at the backup point guard. Mo Williams is one of the aforementioned old and expiring contracts. He is your only option at the point guard behind Kyrie Irving, that is, until he leaves in free agency. Of course, you could always bring him back on a minimum deal, but he will be 34 years old by then, and an early trade for a younger guy might be the better long-term solution. You can make this trade either straight away or closer to the deadline. I personally prefer to do my trades before the start of the season to avoid injury screw-ups. You'll take the team chemistry hit either way, so you might want to get it over with early. Targets for this trade include, but are not limited to, Tim Frazier from the New Orleans Pelicans or the ever-popular TJ McConnell from Philadelphia. Alternatively, without trading Williams, you could grab from the free agent pool either Mario Chalmers, Jarrett Jack or Norris Cole. Keep in mind that you will need to clear a roster spot for that. You could either release Williams because that's who you're replacing, or go a bit more conservative and let either Liggins or James Jones go. I went with Frazier because not only do I think he's the best available candidate, but I'm also a huge New Orleans fan and he has really impressed me so far. That solves the issue at point guard. Now we move down low. Because move number 2 will be to trade for another big man. Your go-to rotation will likely only have one big man off the bench, because Thompson and Love will log heavy minutes at the 4 and 5, and if one of them sits, the other can man the center spot with LeBron at the 4. So realistically, you will only need one good backup big man, so if you look at it from this perspective, you might say, well, I have Fry and Anderson, isn't that enough? Well, enough, yes, but good enough? Less so. In terms of trade assets, we will turn to the 3 guys on the verge of retirement in Jefferson, Dunleavy and Jones. However, next to Shumpert, Jefferson and Dunleavy are your only serviceable options to man the small forward spot, so don't get tempted into offers where you trade both of them. One of them is fine though. As with the previous trade, you can execute this one at any given moment before the deadline. Possible scenarios include a straight-up trade for Kelly Olynyk that I evaluated as way too one-sided to pull it off, or Dunleavy and a first-rounder for Kyle O'Quinn from New York, and that is also the trade I went with. The first-rounder was actually added by me because I found the offer too lopsided without it, but you can pull the trade off with an exchange of expendable bench players instead. If you don't want to trade, once again the free agent pool also has a few interesting targets such as Yee, Montejunas or Hickson. And also once again, if you wish to acquire a player from here, you will have to free up a roster spot first. Your roster after those 2 moves should look something like this. No changes in the starting 5. Irving, Smith, LeBron, Love and Thompson all get 30 or more minutes. Then Frazier or whoever you acquired as a backup point guard comes off the bench behind Irving. Shumpert backs up Smith and or LeBron. Jefferson or Dunleavy if you traded Jefferson as the backup small forward for when Smith sits and LeBron plays elsewhere or sits as well. Fry and O'Quinn or whoever you grab both get a few minutes as well, and it's your decision whether you want to keep the 10-man rotation with both of them off the bench or return to the 9-man rotation that the Cavs start the season with and give all the minutes to O'Quinn. Now, move number 3 is somewhat optional and depends on move number 2. If you did not trade Richard Jefferson in move number 2, then do it now and flip him for a younger, equally rated small forward. The reason behind this is the following. After the playoffs are decided, you will likely get notified of Chris Anderson's retirement. That's okay, because we traded for Kyle O'Quinn specifically for that reason. However, if you didn't trade him away, you might also be faced with Richard Jefferson retiring. And if you traded Dunleavy in move 2, you are now left with a rather large hole at the small forward behind LeBron. Off the bench, you only have Shumpert and an aging and also potentially retiring James Jones to fill that hole, and that might be a bit thin. If you have to do this trade, feel free to postpone it to the trade deadline if you don't want your team chemistry to take as much of a hit. 3 separate trades at the beginning can bring that down quite significantly. The pool of targets is rather large here. It includes Doug McDermott, James Ennis or Jeremy Grant. The list goes on and on, there are quite a few targets available. If you want to package in draft picks, you can get even better assets such as Norman Powell or Andre Robertson. I went with James Ennis, but packaged in a second rounder to make the trade a bit more fair for Memphis. Ennis will now get all the minutes from Richard Jefferson in the rotation, or a bit more depending on personal preference, and we are done with our 3 moves. With this team, you will make the playoffs, likely as the first seed, and your road to the finals should be rather easy. Then chances are that you will face the Warriors, and everything is up in the air. After the season is done, get ready for the retirement of Chris Anderson, and as you can see, Jones also retired, so it was a good idea to grab another small forward. You will pick very late in the draft, so grab a prospect of your choice and move on. You then hold team options for Liggins and Felder, and since you're deep in the red anyways, you might as well take them. Felder is still very young and has room to develop, while after the departure of basically all your small forwards, the need for a player at that position has become a bit bigger, and that is good news for Liggins. The same reason applies to Jordan McRae, who I would extend a qualifying offer to, and then in free agency I would maybe target another big man and or small forward. Keep in mind that because of your salary cap situation you will need to go after players who are willing to sign for the veteran minimum. Happy hunting. After that you can then end the offseason, and that also concludes this video. I hope you liked my ideas for moves to make in Cleveland, and let me know in the comments below how you would handle the Cavs in MyGM or MyLeague. Would you do any moves at all? If yes, which ones? If you're interested in more videos like this, click the playlist on the top left to check out all the other videos I made for 2K17, or if you simply like what I'm doing and want to support the channel, click the trophy icon on the top right to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.